Jay-Z, Sean, Diddy Combs, a lawsuit just dismissed.
And it's the story behind the dismissal that really grabs you, the why and the impact. It's got layers.
Lots to unpack then. So anyone out there who might have missed the headlines, let's get the basics out. It all started with a lawsuit, some heavy accusations against these two music icons.
Yeah, accusations going way back to an alleged incident in 2000. A woman came forward accusing both Jay-Z and Diddy of, well, a very serious crime.
Okay, and to make things even more serious, the woman was just 13 years old at the time.
Yeah, 13, that definitely adds another whole dimension to the case.
It does, just thinking about those kinds of accusations, the pressure, the scrutiny, especially for people as high profile as Jay-Z and Diddy.
Absolutely, the kind of accusations that could just demolish careers and reputations no matter how it all ends up. I mean, it just shows you how even the hint of wrongdoing, especially something like this, can really stick with you.
And from what I understand, Jay-Z, he had a really strong reaction, going beyond just the accusations themselves. It was the timing of it all that seemed really deliberate, almost malicious to him.
Right. Jay-Z was really adamant that the lawyer representing the accuser filed the lawsuit on a very specific day, like pinpointing it the day before the premiere of Mufasa, The Lion King remap.
Oh, wow, the one with his daughter, Blue Ivy.
Exactly. He even said it felt like having, a gun to his head, like he had to choose between supporting his daughter at this huge premiere and dealing with, well, a massive wave of negative press.
That really puts the timing in a whole new perspective. To have something like this drop right before such a big family event must have been incredibly tough.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely makes you wonder about the motives behind the timing, pure coincidence, or something more calculated. From a legal standpoint, Jay-Z is going after the lawyer with a claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress, arguing the timing was meant to, well, cause him the most pain and suffering possible.
That's serious stuff. Can you break that down for our listeners? Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Legally speaking, I mean.
Sure. It basically means someone acted recklessly or intentionally with the goal of causing extreme emotional suffering to another person. It can be hard to prove intent, but if you can, it can mean some big-time damages awarded.
So in this case, Jay-Z is arguing the lawyer chose that date on purpose, knowing the emotional impact it would have.
Exactly, and it'll be interesting to see how that claim plays out. But for now, the lawsuit against Jay-Z, well, it's been dismissed.
And I think it's important to be specific here. It was voluntarily dismissed.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The accuser's attorneys, they chose to drop the lawsuit. They cited some pretty big inconsistencies in her story and even denials from people she claimed to have spoken with.
Inconsistencies like what? Any specifics?
Yeah, there were a few key ones they pointed to. For example, she claimed that her father picked her up after the alleged assault, but from the reports, he didn't remember this happening at all. And then she said that they'd interacted with Benji Madden, the musician, at an after-party, but reportedly, Madden denied even being in New York at the time.
So some big holes in the story, evidence not really adding up.
Seems that way. Here's where it gets really interesting. Even with the dismissal, Jay-Z says he took a huge financial hit from these accusations.
How huge are we talking?
He claims losses of about $20 million in contracts, supposedly lost because of this cloud of accusations hanging over him. And beyond the money, he's talking about serious mental anguish, even though the lawsuit's gone.
20 million, that's wow. Really shows how just the accusation itself, true or not, can have a real lasting impact.
Right. It really highlights the power of reputational damage. We're in a world where information just explodes instantly. Even if you're cleared, that link to a serious accusation, it lingers. Future business deals, endorsements, how the public sees you all affected.
Makes you think how quickly we judge based on allegations, sometimes before we even have all the facts.
Absolutely. In this case, it just drives home the point that even unfounded accusations can have a massive impact on someone's life. Personally, professionally, the whole picture.
Which brings us to a really interesting point. Jay-Z called the dismissal a victory, which, of course, being cleared of these charges, that's a good thing. But he also talked about the personal cost of it all. So victory, but with a pretty big price tag.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. He won legally, but the scars from all this, they could stick around for a long time.
And he did use that phrase, mental anguish. Just a reminder, these public figures, all the fame, fortune, they're still human. They feel things, and their families are affected too.
Totally. So yeah, it's good the lawsuit's gone, but we have to remember there could be long-term effects on his life, his career, all because of this very public accusation.
It's complicated, for sure. A lot to consider. What are your thoughts on this victory at what cost idea? How might this experience shape his life going forward?
It really is, isn't it? Victory at what cost? The emotional weight, the financial strain, even when you're cleared, that damage to your reputation. We don't always think about that stuff when we talk about who won and who lost.
Yeah, easy to forget, with all the headlines and everything, that there are real people at the heart of it all. People with families, careers, lives that are totally affected by these things.
Exactly. And celebrities, even with all the wealth and the platform they have, they're not immune to that emotional distress. They feel it just like anyone else going through something like that, all those fears and anxieties.
This case, it's a real example of the power of perception, isn't it? Even if legally someone's name is cleared, public opinion, that's a whole other battle.
Absolutely. We live in a world where information just spreads like wildfire, and once an accusation is out there, it's almost impossible to control the narrative. Even if it turns out to be false, the damage to your reputation, it can be huge and it lasts.
So how do we strike that balance? Protecting the rights of those who come forward, but also protecting the reputations of the accused. How do we make sure it's fair for everyone?
It's a tough one, no easy answers. We want people to feel safe coming forward to report abuse, to get justice, but at the same time, we have to guard against those false accusations, protect that fundamental right to due process.
A delicate balance. This case, it really highlights how important that conversation is, how much we need to think about these competing interests.
Couldn't agree more. And it also brings up another fascinating point, how unpredictable the legal system can be. We see Jay-Z, the lawsuit against him is dismissed, but Diddy, who was named in that same suit, he's fighting a completely different battle.
Two sides of the same coin, almost. Jay-Z's experience shows us the potential damage from false accusations, while Diddy's situation highlights how complex and, well, unpredictable the legal system can be.
Exactly. That lawsuit against Jay-Z focused on that alleged incident from 2000, but Diddy, he's dealing with a whole other set of legal issues.
What's he facing right now?
So he's actually in jail, waiting for trial on charges that have nothing to do with that initial lawsuit. It's a different fight altogether, over 40 civil lawsuits, and he's behind bars right now, facing charges of racketeering and sex trafficking. His trial's set to begin in May 2025.
Wow, okay, so even though they were both named in that same lawsuit, their legal journeys have gone in totally different directions. It really shows how important it is not to judge too quickly just based on allegations. The legal process, it can be a long, winding road. Lots of unexpected turns.
It really is. Every case is different, with its own circumstances, its own details and nuances. You can't really compare their situations directly or try to predict outcomes just because they were both named in the same lawsuit initially.
Yeah, it's easy to forget, especially when these high-profile cases are all over the news. We tend to form opinions quickly, often without having all the information.
It's human nature, I think. But that's why critical thinking is so important, especially now with information coming at us from all sides. We have to be aware of our own biases, be open to different perspectives, and not jump to conclusions before we have all the facts.
So being more careful about the information we consume, right? Not just taking everything at face value, but really looking at it, thinking about where it's coming from, any potential biases, and whether it's even accurate.
Exactly. It's about having that healthy skepticism, but also staying open to learning and, changing our understanding of the world as we go.
And the power of storytelling, too, right? How these real-life events, the legal battles, the accusations and consequences, they all shape how we see things, how we understand complex issues.
Absolutely. Stories, they grab us, make us feel things, they make us question what we think we know, look at things from a new angle. And these real-life stories, especially when they involve people we recognize, they can be really powerful learning experiences if we're open to it.
It's a good reminder that these legal cases, the headlines, they're not just abstract ideas. It's not just about laws and procedures, but about people. Their lives, their struggles, their wins and losses.
Right, and we should approach these stories with empathy, remember the human side of things, which often gets lost in all the legal terms and media hype.
So as we keep following Jay-Z and Diddy's legal journeys, as we see how their stories unfold, let's remember to be empathetic. Let's try to understand their experiences, acknowledge how tough it must be for them, and look at their stories with compassion and a willingness to learn.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about recognizing that human cost, those scars that might never completely go away, how everyone involved is affected in the long run.
Now, before we get to our final thoughts on this case and what it all means, I'm curious to hear your take on this idea of victory in a situation like this, so emotionally charged and complex. Can you really call it a victory when so much is at stake, personally and professionally?
That's the question, right? Even after it's all over, can there really be a winner when the accusations themselves, whether they're true or not, leave that kind of mark?
Yeah, like ripples, spreading out, touching everyone, not just the people directly involved, but their families, their careers, everyone around them.
It makes you think about the long-term effects, the things we don't see in the headlines, but are still very real for those dealing with the fallout.
JV, you talk about mental anguish, and it makes you wonder, emotionally, psychologically, what that does to a person. How do you even begin to rebuild your life, your sense of self, after something so public, so personal?
It's a process, for sure. Probably different for everyone. But it says a lot about the human spirit, that ability to heal, to keep going, even when things are really rough.
And it reminds us that these public figures, the fame, the money, they're still human. They have the same emotions, the same struggles. Easy to forget that with all the spectacles, the legal battles. There are real people in the middle of it all.
You're so right. We have to remember that empathy, it's not just for the people we see as innocent. Everyone in these situations deserves compassion, understanding, no matter the outcome.
So being mindful of our words, the way we judge, the assumptions we make, especially with these sensitive topics.
Absolutely. Creating a space for respect, for understanding, even when we're dealing with tough, complicated issues that can divide people.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this case, what are some key things you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Well, for me, it's a really layered story. It shows how important critical thinking is, being media literate, and practicing empathy. It reminds us that the legal system, even though it's supposed to bring justice, isn't always perfect, and that these legal fights, they can have a deep and lasting impact on people.
It makes us question our assumptions, dig a little deeper than the headlines, and really consider all sides of the story before we judge.
And maybe most importantly, it reminds us to approach these stories with compassion, remembering that behind every case, every accusation, there are people whose lives are forever changed by what happens.
It's a story that will likely keep unfolding, both legally and in the lives of everyone involved. As we see what happens next, let's use what we've learned today, be critical, open-minded, and approach it all with compassion.
I agree. It's a good reminder that even when the legal part is done, the human side of the story continues. And that's a story worth paying attention to, thinking about, and approaching with empathy.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep trying to understand the world around us a little bit better.